invited as our guest speaker this morning for three reasons. A gentleman, he loves Jesus, he has a compelling life story, and he is a distinguished man of science and healing. We hope that he can help us sort some things out. May I introduce the Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at one of the world's great hospitals, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Dr. Benjamin Carson, Sr. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Obama, distinguished guests, which includes everybody. Thank you so much for this wonderful honor to be at the stage again. I was here 16 years ago, and the fact that they've invited me back means that I didn't offend too many people. So that was great. I want to start by reading four texts which will put into context what I'm going to say. Proverbs 11:9. With his mouth, the godless destroys his neighbor, but through knowledge the righteous escape. Proverbs 11:12. A man who lacks judgment derides his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his tongue. Proverbs 11:25. A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. You know, I have an opportunity to speak in a lot of venues. This is my fourth speech this week. And I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of people. And I've been asking people, what concerns you? What are you most concerned about in terms of the spirituality and the direction of our nation and our world? And I've talked to very prominent Democrats, very prominent Republicans. And I was surprised by the uniformity of their answers. And those have informed my comments this morning. Now, it's not my intention to offend anyone. I have discovered, however, in recent years that it's very difficult to speak to a large group of people these days and not offend someone. And people walk around with their feelings on their shoulders waiting for you to say something. Did you hear that? And they can't hear anything else you say. The PC police are out in force at all times. I remember once I was talking to a group about the difference between a human brain and a dog's brain. And a man got offended. He said, you can't talk about dogs like that. But, you know, people just focus in on that, completely miss the point of what you're saying. And we've reached a point where people are afraid to actually talk about what they want to say because somebody might be offended. People are afraid to say Merry Christmas at Christmas time. It doesn't matter whether the person you're talking to is Jewish or, you know, whether they're any religion. That's a salutation, a greeting of goodwill. We've got to get over this sensitivity, you know, and it keeps people from saying what they really believe. You know, I'm reminded of a very successful young businessman, and he loved to buy his mother these exotic gifts for Mother's Day, and he ran out of ideas, and then he ran across these birds. These birds were cool. You know, they cost $5,000 a piece. They could dance, they could sing, they could talk. He was so excited he bought 2 of them. Sent them to his mother, couldn't wait to call her up on Mother's Day. Mother, what did you think of those birds? And she said, they was good. He said, no, Mother, you didn't need those birds. Those birds cost $5,000 a piece. They could dance, they could sing, they could talk. And she said, well, they should have said something. And you know, that's where we end up too if we don't speak up for what we believe. And you know what we need to do, what we need to do in this PC world is forget about unanimity of speech and unanimity of thought. And we need to concentrate on being respectful those people with whom we disagree. And that's when I think we begin to make real progress. And one last thing about political correctness, which I think is a horrible thing, by the way. I'm very, very compassionate, and I'm not ever out to offend anyone. But PC is dangerous. Because you see, this country, one of the founding principles was freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And it muffles people. It puts a muzzle on them. And at the same time, keeps people from discussing important issues while the fabric of their society is being changed. And we cannot fall for that trick. And what we need to do is start talking about things that are important, things that were important in the development of our nation. Well, one of those things was education. I'm very passionate about education because it's made such a big difference in my life. But here we are at a time in the world, the information age, the age of technology. And yet, 30% of people who enter high school in this country do not graduate. 44% of people who start a 4-year college program do not finish it in 4 years. What is that about? Think back to a darker time in our history, 200 years ago when slavery was going on. It was illegal to educate a slave, particularly to teach him to read. Why do you think that was? Because when you educate a man, you liberate a man. And there I was as a youngster, placing myself in the same situation that a horrible institution did, because I wasn't taking advantage of the education. I was a horrible student. Most of my classmates thought I was the stupidest person in the world. They called me dummy. I was the butt of all the jokes. Now, admittedly, it was a bad environment. Single-parent home. You know, my mother and father had gotten divorced early on. My mother got married when she was 13. She was one of 24 children. Had a horrible life. Discovered that her husband was a bigamist. Had another family. And she only had a third-grade education. She had to take care of us. Dire poverty. I had a horrible temper, poor self-esteem. All the things that you would think would preclude success. But I had something very important. I had a mother who believed in me. And I had a mother who would never allow herself to be a victim, no matter what happened. Never made excuses, and she never accepted an excuse from us. And if we ever came up with an excuse, she always said, "Do you have a brain?" And if the answer was yes, then she said, "Then you could have thought your way out of it. It doesn't matter what John or Susan or Mary or anybody else did or said." And it was the most important thing she did for my brother and myself. Because if you don't accept excuses, pretty soon people stop giving them and they start looking for solutions. And that is a critical issue when it comes to success. Well, you know, we did live in dire poverty. And one of the things that I hated was poverty. You know, some people hate spiders, some people hate snakes. I hated poverty. I couldn't stand it. And, but, you know, my mother couldn't stand the fact that we were doing poorly in school. And she prayed and she asked God to give her wisdom. What could she do to get her young sons to understand the importance of developing their minds so that they can control their own lives? And you know what? God gave her the wisdom, at least in her opinion. My brother and I didn't think it was that wise, because it was to turn off the TV. Let us watch only 2 or 3 TV programs during the week, and with all that spare time, read 2 books apiece from the Detroit Public Libraries and submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And she put check marks and highlights and stuff. But, you know, I just hated this. And my friends were out having a good time. Her friends would criticize her. They would say, "You can't make boys stay in the house reading books. They'll grow up, they'll hate you." And I would overhear them, and I'd say, "Mother, you know they're right." But she didn't care, you know. But after a while, I actually began to enjoy reading those books. Because we were very poor, but between the covers of those books, I could go anywhere, I could be anybody, I could do anything. I began to read about people of great accomplishment. And as I read those stories, I began to see a connecting thread. I began to see that the person who has the most to do it You and what happens to you in life is you. You make decisions. You decide how much energy you want to put behind that decision. And I came to understand that I had control of my own destiny. And at that point, I didn't hate poverty anymore because I knew it was only temporary. I knew I could change that. It was incredibly liberating for me. It made all the difference. And continue on that theme of education. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville came to America to study this country. The Europeans were fascinated. How could a fledgling nation, barely 50 years old, already be competing with them on virtually every level? This was impossible. De Tocqueville was going to sort it out. And he looked at our government, and he was duly impressed by the 3 branches of government. 4 now, because now special interest groups, but it was only 3 back in those days. And, he said, wow, this is really something. And then he said, but let me look at their educational system. And he was blown away. See, that anybody finishing the 2nd grade was completely literate. He could find a mountain man on the outskirts of society. The man could read the newspaper, could have a political discussion, could tell him how the government worked. If you really want to be impressed, take a look at the chapter on education in my latest book, America the Beautiful, which I wrote with my wife. Came out last year. And in that education chapter, you will see questions extracted from a 6th grade exit exam from the 1800s. A test you had to pass to get your 6th grade certificate. I doubt most college graduates today could pass that test. We have dumbed things down to that level. And the reason that that is so dangerous is because the people who founded this nation said that our system of government was designed for a well-informed and educated populace. And when they become less informed, they become vulnerable. Think about that. Our system of government, and that's why the education is so vitally important. Now, some people say, you're overblowing it, things aren't that bad. And you're a doctor, a neurosurgeon. Why are you concerned about these things? I've got news for you. 5 doctors signed the Declaration of Independence. Doctors were involved in the framing of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, a whole bunch of things. It's only been in recent decades that we've extracted ourselves, which I think is a big mistake. We need doctors and we need scientists, engineers. We need all those people involved in government, not just lawyers. I don't have anything against lawyers, but, here's the thing about lawyers. And I'm sorry, but I got to be truthful, okay? Got to be truthful. What do lawyers learn in law school? To win. By hook or by crook, you got to win. So you got all these Democrat lawyers and you got all these Republican lawyers, and their side wants to win. We need to get rid of that. What we need to start thinking about is how do we solve problems? And now, before I get shot, let me finish here. Now, one of the reasons, and I don't like to bring up problems without coming up with solutions. My wife and I started the Carson Scholars Fund 16 years ago after we heard about a survey, international survey, looking at the ability of 8th graders in 22 countries to solve math and science problems. And we came out number 21 out of 22, barely beat out number 22, very concerning. And we'd go into schools and we'd see all these trophies, all-state basketball, all-state wrestling, all-state this, that, and the other. The quarterback was the big man on campus. And what about the intellectual superstar? What did they get? A National Honor Society pin? A pat on the head, there, little nerd? Nobody cared about them. And is it any wonder that sometimes the smart kids try to hide? They don't want anybody to know that they're smart. This is not helping us as a nation. So we started giving out scholarships to students from all backgrounds for superior academic performance and demonstration of humanitarian qualities. Unless you cared about other people, it didn't matter how smart you were. We got plenty of people like that. We don't need those. We need smart people who care about other people. We would give them money. The money would go into a trust. They would get interest on it. And when they went to college, they get the money. But also the school gets a trophy. Every bit as impressive as any sports trophies. Goes right out there with the others. They get a medal. They get to go to a banquet. And we try to put them on the same kind of pedestal as we do the all-state athletes. Now, I have nothing against athletics or entertainment. Please believe me. You know, I'm from Baltimore. The Ravens won. This is great, okay? But what will maintain our position in the world? The ability to shoot a 25-foot jump shot or the ability to solve a quadratic equation? And we need to put the things into proper perspective. And, you know, many teachers, you know,